Welcome to Grace Lutheran Church. We are glad that you could join us for this video. This video is all about opening up the church building again for in-person worship. We are excited to do that for those members that feel comfortable coming back to worship to Grace Lutheran Church. And we will, of course, continue to have our services online for those who feel more comfortable worshiping from their homes during this pandemic. And so we have taken some precautions and some expectations that we have placed on ourselves and we are placing on you as we all return to in-person worship to make sure that we are being as safe as possible for our worship services. So as we begin our in-person worship, we ask for your flexibility about these expectations that we're placing on everybody. And one of those first expectations is the worship times and capacity of our worship. One of the things that the CDC recommends is 50 people for small gatherings, and so that will be our limit, which includes our staff and volunteers that are helping out with our worship services. And that is also the capacity that our worship space actually holds if we follow that proper 6-foot distancing model. And so in order to ensure that we have a correct amount of people in worship, we will be taking phone reservations. So if you would like to worship with us, call the church office at 928-753-3068 and then wait for the options that are presented to you and press extension 5 to get to speak to one of our volunteers who will be making those worship reservations. When you do come to worship after making a reservation, we invite you to come up to 30 minutes before worship. And as you do, you will be greeted by some volunteers that will help to make sure that you are prepared and ready for our worship services here at Grace. So you will be checked off the list to make sure that you did make that reservation that we just talked about. And you will have your temperature checked as well as to make sure that you are wearing a mask. And then after that, you will come inside the building where you will then be asked to sanitize your hands with our new touchless hand sanitizing stations. And if you are unable to use hand sanitizer, you will be invited to go over to the restroom to wash your hands there. After that, you will then be greeted by an usher who will then take you to your seat. As you are walked down the aisle by your usher, they will make sure that you sit in one of the open sections. As you can see, some of them are blocked off to ensure that we keep that social distancing during our worship services. So they will seat you to make sure that we keep that proper distance. And they will seat you from the front to the back to make sure that we aren't passing each other during that time period. Now that you are in your seat, we invite you to patiently wait while our service begins. And our services will last around 30 to 40 minutes as they have been in the past for safety reasons as well as to ensure that we have the proper amount of time to sanitize between services. One of the other things that will be a change will be there will be no passing of the peace and there will be no collecting of offering by passing of the plates. Instead, plates will be placed in the narthex, so as you enter or leave worship, you can then place your offering in those baskets. One of the other things that will continue to stay as it was online is our music. Our music will continue to be recorded for the safety of those of you gathered as well as of our musicians. And so we invite you not to sing during our worship services, and we invite you to sit back and just enjoy the service. Your pastor will lead everything from start to finish, including the readings and the liturgy. There will be no back and forth response in the liturgy. People will just sit and listen to the liturgy during that time as well. Once our service is over, then our ushers will then usher you back out of the worship space. And this time they will invite you from the back to the front to exit the building to continue to offer that social distancing during that time. And then we invite you to head off to your cars and then head home. During this time, we will not be having any fellowship time, any coffee or goodies or anything of that nature, just so that we can continue to encourage people to maintain that social distancing and to keep everyone as safe as possible. Our restrooms will be open, however, they are intended to be used for emergency purposes only. And in order to make sure of your safety, we will have an usher monitor the restrooms if someone does enter them, to ensure that we just keep one person in the restroom at a time. As well as our drinking fountains will not be in use, so that we can make sure that no one is spreading the virus through. So those are just some of the highlights of what our worship services are going to look like when we return to worship. However, if you are at high risk for health or do not feel comfortable returning to in-person worship, your pastors, your staff, your council are saying stay home. We want you to do what is best and most comfortable for you and what will keep you the safest during this time. And we want you to know that no matter what, we will continue to bring you worship services online for those of you who wish to stay in your homes. And also, no matter what, the church has been and always will be about the people, not about the physical building. So people of Grace Lutheran Church, we are glad that we are going to be able to return to in-person worship, but please do what is best for each of you. Take care of yourselves. I hope this video has been helpful and informative as we begin to return to worship, and know that these are just some of the highlights of what to expect when we return to worship. So thank you for watching this video, and if you are able and comfortable, we look forward to seeing you in worship. One of the things that we felt was important here at Grace during our worship services is to bring you communion, and we will continue to do that as long as we are able to do it as safely as possible and in a effective and good manner. And so the solution that we have come up with are the prepackaged communion kits, which typically we use when we bring people home communion. That way, as I mentioned, it's already prepackaged, and so it will be as safe as possible for you. It will be handed to you by a gloved volunteer, and you will be taking communion at your seat in worship at the same time with everybody else and the pastor. And we felt this was the safest method to bring you communion, as long as it continues to be that and continues to be an effective way for communion. And so one of the things that we wanted to show you today, the real purpose of this video, was to tell you and show you how to open up one of these little communion kits, because they can be a little tricky. And so one of the things that you will notice is the wafer is on top and then the juice is underneath. And one of the things that that you need to look for is there is a clear little film on the top of this package, and that little film will pop up, and as you pull that, you got to be tough, but you got to be careful. That will then get you to your wafer. And then during worship, you will then be invited to take that communion wafer. And then you've got the little tinfoil part, which then keeps the juice separated. And again, you need to be tough but careful so that you do not spill. And you peel this. I would suggest not pulling it completely off. And then you will then take the grape juice at the same time as everybody else. And maybe not at the same time because it isn't easy. It's not easy for everybody, but that is our hope, is to be able to use these as a way to carefully and safely provide you with communion. And if those don't work out, then we will explore other options, but we feel that having communion in the traditional way is not a safe means for anyone involved, and so we may continue to have in-person worship services, but we may not have communion during that time until we can find something that is safe and convenient for everybody.